What would happen in case the monsters of ancient legends were not created but recalled? The mythological animals we have long rejected and condemned to the realm of mere fantasy, the byproduct of overwrought fancies and campfires. However, modern science has discovered something extraordinary. A good number of these so-called myths were founded on true animals, misinterpreted fossils, and actual biological phenomena. Diving into 7 mythical animals today that did exist, it is unbelievable to know the horrible truth behind the monsters that plagued the nightmares of our ancestors. Before we get to the first creature, tap like and subscribe. New documentaries like this are coming every week. We can begin with one of the most popular mythical animals. 1. The griffin. You have heard it all. Half eagle, half lion, keeping treasure in fairy tales. But this is what practically no one will tell you about the genesis of this legend. A shocking discovery was made by ancient nomadic traders who took the Silk Road by traversing the Gobi Desert, huge skulls buried in the sand. These weren't just any bones. They were of Protoceratops, a dinosaur now extinct millions of years. But these traders had no idea of dinosaurs and deep time. What they saw in reality was a beaked skull, which almost appeared like the head of an eagle and was fixed to a body four-legged like a lion. The merchants were not creating this or telling this tall tale. They were really telling the truth about what they saw. Better still, these fossils were often found near the gold deposits in the area. The myth is crystallized here. Traders came back home with stories about eagle-headed, lion-bodied animals that had been discovered by the place of gold in the desert. The ancient people had not believed that bones were millions of years old. The only logical conclusion? It was somewhere they were alive in the great, untamed tracts of Central Asia. It is not the actual discovery that griffins derive out of fossils. It is that we possess real testimony of merchants of these discoveries. These weren't fantasy writers spinning tales. They were practical traders, trying to make sense of something genuinely mysterious they encountered during their journeys. But fossils weren't the only source of monster legends. Some creatures were very much alive. 2. The Ahul. The school has been experienced by the people living deep within the volcanic caves of Indonesia over the years. They tell of a bat-like creature whose wingspan is broader than a canoe, and which comes out in fierce storms and gives out cries most frighteningly human. This is seen by most cryptozoologists as mere folklore. However, this is the difference with the Ahul. Indonesia already has flying fox bats that have the size of their wingspans up to 6 feet. These are living animals of this day. And something more interesting is indicated by the fossil record. In this very vicinity lived prehistoric megabats, far larger than anything we know today. The school reports are scientifically plausible because of the evolution of bats. Bats are quick and adaptable to hostile conditions and masters of disguise. There are remote cave systems of volcanoes in Indonesia which are not well explored. The fact that a megabat species might still remain unknown, and perhaps a prehistoric ancestor still exists, is not a fantasy. This makes biological sense. What makes researchers think seriously on this is the information of the local accounts. The witnesses always recall precisely the same characteristics: huge size, certain sounds, and appearances that are present only in the storm time when the visibility is bad. These are not the trademarks of fictional tales. They are the course of veritable animal sightings with something uncommon and unseen. Talking of elusive creatures, we will go north to the frosty waters where the Finnish sailors faced their nightmare. If this story gave you chills, you know what to do. Like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you're here for the next one. 3. The Iku Turso. Finland folklore speaks of the Iku Turso, a hideous sea beast with massive tusks, a dark scarred skin, and what seemed to be armor plate. It was defined by sailors as territorial and violent, and attacked any boat that came too near. The truth behind this legend is virtually never told outside of the folklore of Finnish circles, though it is amazing. Northern Europe in ancient times had giant species of walrus that were much larger and much more aggressive than their present-day counterparts. These prehistoric walruses possessed massive tusks, dark, heavily scarred skin from territorial battles, and thick hide that could appear armored when wet and reflected light. Early sailors encountering these creatures had no framework for understanding what they were seeing. Imagine being in a small wooden boat surrounded by fog when a creature the size of a car surfaces beside you with tusks as long as your arm. You've never seen anything like it. You have no knowledge of marine biology or animal classification. The monster you describe when you return to port isn't an invention. It's a terrifying attempt to explain something genuinely dangerous that you encountered but couldn't categorize. The Ikuturso wasn't a myth. It was a memory of a real apex predator that once dominated northern waters. From the frozen north, our journey takes us to the seismically active islands of Japan, where another creature holds scientific secrets. 4. The Namazu. Japanese mythology has it that the Namazu is a giant catfish that dwells deep in the ground and has its thrashing movement that results in earthquakes. This appears on the face of it as more classic mythological reasoning which attributes natural disasters to the activity of monsters. Yet strike deep and you will have something remarkable. Japan is located at the center of major tectonic fault lines, and thus it enjoys a high rate of seismic activity. And here is the important point. Actual catfish are characterized by erratic and strange behavior before earthquakes. This isn't folklore. It is observable, documented animal behavior noticed and recorded by Japanese people for centuries. The Namazu myth is not a mere story. It's proto-seismology. The ancient Japanese observers have had a real relationship between the animal behavior and the earthquakes. They had no scientific paradigm to interpret tectonic plates, but they had chosen a predictor of an earthquake activity correctly. This mythology is kept alive in a mythological system of early earthquake science, whereby the knowledge of the early times has been able to survive even up to now. The explanation that fitted into their worldview was that the giant underground catfish, but the essence of it was that the behavior of catfish does alter before earthquakes. The same tendency of actual observation and mythological interpretation is re-embraced in the shady woods of Germany. Quick pause, hit like if you're with me, and subscribe for the next mythical creatures. 5. The Elwitrich. German folklore, especially in the Palatinate, talks about the Elwitrich, a strange bird-like beast with fangs, wings, and occasionally with the antlers, prowling thick forests and frightening passerbys. Elwitrich is barely known outside Germany, but its story of origin is quite impressive. Exotic animals were commonly imported to Europe in the Roman era to entertain, give personal collections, and be on display. These imports included large, flightless birds in faraway lands, maybe cousins of cassowaries or other violent species. These birds were going to be completely foreign to the European forest ecosystems when they escaped or were released. Suppose a medieval hunter came upon a 6-foot-tall bird which had no wings, much straining legs, which was fiercely protective of its territory, and strange vocalizations echoing through the trees at night. Add in the reality that European forests were dark, largely unmapped, and genuinely dangerous, and you have the perfect conditions for legendary evolution. A few real sightings combined with fearful retelling, artistic interpretation by people who'd never seen the actual creature, and the social amplification that happens in isolated communities, and within a generation, you have a monster. Elwitrich shows how quickly reality transforms into myth when people lack the biological knowledge to categorize what they've encountered. But sometimes the truth behind the myth is even darker. 6. Megalodon. There was a huge creature that, believed to be under ancient oceans, was so huge that it reinvented the concept of apex predation. The megalodon, a shark of unimaginable sizes, spent 2 decades on the ocean, with teeth that were the size of the human ones and jaws that could swallow cars completely. It was not fiction, but was a reality and was fashioned into stone using fossilized remains that were found on every continent. There was a time, millions of years ago, when we will travel with the family to see the emergence, supremacy, and enigmatic extinction of the most terrifying marine predator who has ever lived. This is the ideal killing machine which nature has created. The legend begins now. The name and origins. Megalodon is a heavy word in its words. It is an ancient Greek word that is a combination of mega, which means big or huge, and odon, which means tooth, giant tooth. The reason behind this simple but impressive name being one cannot be disputed. It was the vast fossilized teeth which initially made the existence of this creature known to modern science. These teeth, of which some were up to 8 inches in length, were discovered a long time before anybody knew what animal they belonged to. They were found by ancient people and were thought to be tongues of a dragon that had been transformed into a stone, or the fangs of a serpent belonging to some mythical creature. Little were they aware that these relics were a part of something much more actual and much more terrible. 7.
Wendigo. All right, this one's dark. The Algonquian people of the North Forests had a clue of the frightening nature of human beings. Some people decide the unthinkable when they are starving in the midst of a fierce winter when there is literally no food left. They cannibalize human flesh in order to live. And as the legend says, it is the Wendigo that takes you then. It starts as a possession, this hunger that you can never satiate however big your meal is. You grow gaunt, skeletal, your visions draw in, then begins to grow. 10 feet high, 15, 20. And here's the twisted part. The bigger you eat, the bigger you become, but you're always starving. Your hunger increases faster than your body. The Wendigo is described by people as a skeletal figure with matted hair covered in heart of ice and moves around by use of winter storms. Indigenous records give examples of Wendigo psychosis. Individuals became violent and cannibalistic in the cases perhaps to discourage cannibalism within the culture. The old people tell stories of hunters coming back different and whole villages being swept away and voices in snows. The idea of Wendigo is frequently used by the contemporary media and is the point of concern among many indigenous people since it reflects more profound ideas of inner darkness, greed, and consequences of colonialism and capitalism. The Wendigo is more than a myth in distant forest regions of the North. In remote areas, it is a living, haunting reality.
These 7 animals demonstrate that our forefathers were not primitive and stupid. They were astute critics who made attempts to interpret a world that is much stranger than we would care to admit. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for the next dive and comment what you think is really existed.